Hello and welcome. Tonight, we explore the stories of the most wanted men and women of the medieval era. Those names whispered in dimly lit taverns, inscribed in royal decrees, and occasionally scribbled onto wanted parchments, when the responsible monk hadn't run out of ink or motivation. Before we begin, if you appreciate this type of content, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always interesting to discover who's joining us from around the world. Now settle in comfortably, perhaps dim the lights, and let's begin this journey through medieval history together. William Wallace, the man who became King Edward I's perpetual headache. Born somewhere in Scotland around 1270, Wallace was supposed to live a quiet life as a minor knight. Perhaps fight in a few local skirmishes, drink some ale, complain about the weather. Normal medieval hobbies, you know. Instead, he decided to become England's crown enemy number one, simply by existing loudly as a Scot. His primary crime, existing inconveniently for England. The fun began when English troops eliminated his family. Wallace's response was not diplomatic. He embarked on a revenge tour of English garrisons. It wasn't exactly a diplomatic approach, but it was certainly memorable. He quickly graduated from local nuisance to Scotland's favorite rebel uncle. That type of relative who shows up at family gatherings and asks, "Who wants to overthrow a king today?" His greatest moment was the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297. Imagine thousands of English soldiers trying to cross a narrow wooden bridge, while Wallace and his men waited on the other side with sharp spears and bad intentions. The Scots let them cross halfway, then cut them down like weeds needing pruning. It was less a battle and more a collective humiliation. England left with fewer men and zero dignity. Naturally, Edward I, also known as Hammer of the Scots, because apparently passive-aggressive Tapper of the Scots was already taken, was furious. Wallace, meanwhile, was enjoying outlaw life, raiding, vanishing, reappearing, and generally making England look like the world's worst babysitter. But every medieval rebel has an expiration date. Wallace's came in 1305, when he was betrayed, captured, and dragged to London for a trial that was basically theater. The charge? Treason. His defense? "I cannot betray a king I never swore loyalty to." The judges were not impressed. Verdict? Guilty. Execution in medieval England was never just, "Let's kill him." Oh no, they wanted a show. Wallace was dragged through the streets, hanged until nearly dead, cut open like a piñata, and his organs flamboyantly removed. Then they quartered him and mailed the pieces around England as a sort of motivational poster for anyone thinking of rebelling. His head got prime real estate on London Bridge, staring down commuters like a very aggressive welcome sign. To Scotland, Wallace was a hero. To England, he was a cautionary tale. To everyone else, he was proof that in the Middle Ages you could go from minor knight to national icon to dismembered street decoration in record time. Forget Robin Hood. William de Morisco was the upgrade nobody asked for, but everyone got. Where Robin allegedly robbed the rich and gave to the poor, William robbed the rich and then kept it. Because honestly, who wouldn't? Born into a noble but problematic family in the early 13th century, William grew up with the kind of resume that made kings twitch. his family was already accused of treason, which, in medieval terms, was basically genetic. Instead of playing it safe, William leaned in. Why settle for being a regular noble when you could be a pirate, a rebel, and possibly the most irritating island landlord in England? The drama peaked when William was accused of attempting to assassinate King Henry III. Now, if there's one surefire way to get your face plastered on every wanted list, it's attempted regicide. The Crown didn't just want him arrested, they wanted to turn him into a cautionary bedtime story. So William fled to Lundy Island, a rock off the Devon coast that became his personal villain lair. From there, he launched a career in piracy. He raided ships, robbed merchants, and turned the Bristol Channel into his own medieval toll booth. Except, instead of handing you a receipt, he stole your cargo and sometimes your crew. Merchants complained, the Crown fumed, and William just kept cashing in like the sea was his personal ATM. For nearly 2 decades, he made himself a royal nuisance. Think about that. 20 years of making King Henry III look like he couldn't control his own coastline. The king finally snapped and sent a small army to storm Lundy Island. William, shockingly, lost. Turns out, ragtag pirate crew doesn't beat angry king with soldiers. His execution in 1242 was medieval performance art. First, he was dragged through London streets to remind everyone what happened to people who annoyed the crown. Then hanged, drawn, and quartered, the full deluxe package. His body parts were distributed across the kingdom like grim party favors. The message was clear. Don't rebel, don't pirate, and definitely don't try to stab the king. William de Morisco may not have inspired ballads, but he didn't need to. He was living proof that being most wanted in the Middle Ages wasn't about justice or morality. It was about how spectacularly you managed to irritate a king. And in that department, William was world-class. If you were making a list of people medieval kings wished would just stay quiet and embroider, Eleanor of Aquitaine would be at the top. She wasn't just smart, she was dangerously smart, which in the 12th century was the fastest way for a woman to be labeled a heretic, a witch, or my ex-wife. Born in 1122, Eleanor inherited the Duchy of Aquitaine, one of the richest regions in France. Translation: she had more money, land, and influence than half the noblemen combined, and they hated it. She married King Louis VII of France, went on the Second Crusade with him, and proceeded to make him look incompetent in front of half of Europe. She suggested military strategies, organized supplies, and rumor has it, even showed up dressed like an Amazon warrior. The French clerics clutched their rosaries so hard they probably left permanent dents. The marriage ended badly. Louis wanted a quiet, obedient queen. Eleanor wanted to actually run things. Divorce followed, and within months she upgraded to Henry Plantagenet, soon to be King Henry II of England. It was the medieval equivalent of dumping your boring boyfriend and immediately dating the hottest, most chaotic rock star in Europe. With Henry, Eleanor had 8 children, including 2 kings, Richard the Lionheart and John Lackland, also known as Loses Everything. But she wasn't just raising royal babies. She was running governments, advising on politics, and occasionally stirring rebellion when Henry annoyed her, and he annoyed her often. By 1173, she openly supported her sons in a revolt against him. Family dinners must have been lively. Henry eventually got tired of her scheming and locked her up. 16 years of imprisonment, because apparently being clever and ambitious counted as high treason in a wife. Yet even behind bars, Eleanor remained a political powerhouse. She was freed when Richard took the throne and immediately started managing the kingdom like it was her personal project. By the time she died at age 82, practically prehistoric by medieval standards, she had outlived both husbands, watched 2 sons become kings, and left behind a dynasty that would shape Europe for centuries. The church called her scandalous. The kings called her dangerous. History calls her brilliant. Eleanor of Aquitaine wasn't just wanted. She was the medieval reminder that intelligence, ambition, and ovaries made for a combination most men simply couldn't handle. If you think teenagers today are dramatic, wait until you meet Joan of Arc, a 15th century French farm girl who told everyone she heard voices from saints, then proceeded to lead armies into battle like she was born with cheat codes. Born in 1412, Joan was a peasant with 0 military training, but she insisted God had chosen her to save France from the English during the 100 Years' War. Most people would have laughed, but France was losing so badly that the royal court basically said, "You know what? Fine. Let's see what the teenager can do." Desperation makes for strange hiring practices. And somehow it worked. Dressed in armor, carrying a banner, Joan became a mascot and miracle worker rolled into one. French soldiers, usually demoralized and half-drunk, suddenly rallied behind her. In 1429, she lifted the siege of Orleans, a victory that shocked everyone, especially the English, who had just been beaten by a girl who couldn't even legally drink their weak medieval ale. But Joan's rise was as fast as it was dangerous. Kings don't like being upstaged, and church authorities don't like teenage prophets handing out military advice. Worse, she became a national symbol, which in medieval politics meant she was now a walking target with a bullseye painted by God himself. Captured in 1430 by Burgundian allies of the English, Joan was sold like cattle and handed over for trial. The English called her a witch, a heretic, and a cross-dresser, because yes, wearing armor was apparently more offensive than leading an army. The court proceedings were a circus of loaded questions, trick traps, and clergy who had clearly decided on the verdict before she even spoke. In 1431, at the age of 19, Joan was burned alive in Rouen marketplace. Crowds gathered, not to mourn, but to watch the show. Public execution was basically medieval Netflix.
Decades later, the church did a medieval oops and cleared her of heresy. Then, nearly 500 years after frying her, they canonized her as a saint. Nothing says we made a mistake like elevating someone from witch to holy icon. Joan of Arc wasn't just wanted. She was the nightmare of every medieval power structure. Young, female, stubborn, and inconveniently successful. If medieval rulers were brands, then Vlad III of Wallachia had the most aggressive marketing campaign in Europe. Forget the Bold or the Great. He was Vlad the Impaler. Subtlety? Never heard of it. Born in 1431 in Transylvania, yes, the place every vampire movie points to with jazz hands, Vlad inherited a throne, a temper, and a knack for extreme problem-solving. His nickname came from his favorite hobby, impaling people on wooden stakes. Criminals, enemies, diplomats who annoyed him, no one was safe. He didn't just execute people. He turned executions into public art installations. Imagine walking into town and finding a literal forest of corpses swaying in the wind like some grotesque Christmas display. His relationship with the Ottoman Empire was tense in the same way fire and gasoline have a tense relationship. Sometimes he paid tribute, sometimes he didn't. Once he invited Ottoman envoys to his court and noticed they wouldn't remove their turbans. Vlad, ever the gracious host, had their turbans nailed to their skulls. Problem solved. Cultural respect achieved. But his most infamous stunt was during a major Ottoman invasion in 1462. Sultan Mehmed II marched in expecting a fight. Instead, he found 20,000 impaled bodies lining the roads, rotting in the sun. The message was clear. Welcome to Wallachia, population you if you're not careful. The Ottomans were so horrified they turned around. Terrorism as national defense. Grim, but effective. Of course, branding yourself as the guy who stabs people with trees doesn't win you many friends at home either. Local nobles hated him. Rival claimants wanted him gone. Even his allies side-eyed him. Depending on the chronicle, Vlad was either a patriotic hero defending his people or a sadistic maniac who made Genghis Khan look like a kindergarten teacher. Eventually, his enemies caught up with him. He was killed in battle, or possibly betrayed, or maybe assassinated. Accounts differ, but one thing's certain. He didn't retire peacefully with a pension and a garden. His head was sent to the Sultan as a trophy, proving that even the Impaler could end up impaled by politics. Centuries later, Bram Stoker borrowed Vlad's name and reputation for his vampire Count Dracula. So yes, Vlad's branding stuck, literally forever. Not many rulers get remembered for their stake collection. In short, Vlad wasn't just wanted, he was the medieval equivalent of a viral horror meme. Every medieval most wanted list needs at least one guy who couldn't pick a career path. Enter Eustace the Monk. Former Benedictine monk, part-time sorcerer, full-time pirate, and occasional accountant. Yes, accountant. Even criminals had to balance the books. Born around 1170 in Boulogne, Eustace started off in a monastery for reasons historians still debate. Boredom? Bad beer? A particularly stern abbot? He ditched the monk life. Supposedly, he even studied black magic. Was he really a wizard, or was this just medieval rumor mill slander? Hard to say, but pirate wizard definitely sounds cooler than disgruntled ex-monk with anger issues. After leaving holy life, Eustace dabbled in law, then promptly broke it. He clashed with the Count of Boulogne, which escalated into full-blown outlawry. With the king's men chasing him, Eustace did what any sensible fugitive would. He ran to sea and became a pirate. Not a yo-ho-ho romanticized pirate either. More of a burn your ships, rob your cargo, laugh while doing it type. Operating out of the Channel Islands, he terrorized merchant ships and coastal towns. Sometimes he fought for France, sometimes for England, sometimes for himself. He was basically the medieval gig economy in human form, switching employers whenever it suited him. Picture a mercenary on LinkedIn with endorsements for plundering, tax evasion, and black arts. By 1212, Eustace had carved out such a reputation that both England and France wanted him dead. He played both sides during the wars between King John of England and Philip of France, raiding ports and charging protection fees like a medieval mob boss. The English crown accused him of treason. The French accused him of betrayal. Merchants accused him of ruining their lives. Basically, everyone had him on speed dial for most wanted. His end came in 1217 at the Battle of Sandwich. Yes, that's the actual name. Eustace was captured by English forces after his ship was cornered. Offered the chance to surrender for mercy, he declined, which was bold because his captors promptly chopped off his head.
No trial, no delay, just quick decapitation and a collective sigh of relief from every sailor in the Channel. Eustace the Monk wasn't remembered as noble or tragic.
He was remembered as the chaos button everyone regretted pressing. Pirate, sorcerer, accountant, and eventually cautionary tale. Most generals struggle to win battles with full use of their senses. Jan Žižka of Bohemia said, "Hold my beer and my eyeball." He lost one eye early in life, then the other later on, and still managed to be one of the most undefeated military commanders in history. Yes, undefeated. Blindness 0, Žižka 100. Born around 1360, Žižka grew up in a turbulent Bohemia where religion, politics, and general bad vibes collided. When the Hussite Wars broke out after Jan Hus was burned for heresy, Žižka joined the rebels. The Catholic Church and Holy Roman Empire thought they were fighting disorganized peasants. Žižka proved them wrong by turning farmers into an army that chewed up knights for breakfast. His genius? The war wagon. He basically invented medieval tanks. Heavy wagons chained together into mobile fortresses, bristling with crossbows, pikes, and early firearms. Imagine rolling up to a fancy armored knight on horseback, only to be blasted in the face by a peasant hiding behind a wooden cart. Knights hated it. Peasants loved it. Žižka's wagons turned every muddy hill into a death trap. Even after he went totally blind, Žižka kept commanding. He used messengers and memory to direct battles, relying on sound, instinct, and the sheer terror he inspired in both friends and foes. His soldiers followed him not just because he was smart, but because losing wasn't on the menu, ever. Under Žižka, the Hussites won battle after battle against crusades sent by popes and emperors alike. His reputation grew so fearsome that enemies sometimes refused to fight him outright. Stories circulated that Žižka's mere presence could doom an army. It didn't matter if he couldn't see. His enemies saw him just fine, and that was enough. He finally died in 1424, not from battle, but from illness, a disappointment to anyone hoping for a Hollywood ending. According to legend, Žižka ordered his skin to be made into a war drum so he could keep terrifying enemies even after death. Whether or not that's true, the rumor alone was enough to keep knights awake at night. Jan Žižka wasn't just wanted, he was unavoidable. The blind general who beat everyone, left undefeated, and basically turned peasant uprisings into one long medieval TED Talk on why you shouldn't underestimate farmers with carts. If Scotland had William Wallace, Wales had Owain Glyndŵr, the man who basically looked at English authority and said, "Not today, Henry." Born around 1359 into a minor noble family, Glyndŵr had enough wealth to be respectable, but enough national pride to make himself very inconvenient for the English crown. In 1400, fed up with English rule, Glyndŵr declared himself Prince of Wales. Not kind of Welsh, not local leader, but the actual prince, as in, "Move over, monarchy, this is mine now." Bold move. Risky, too. Within weeks, he went from landowner to most wanted with a price on his head. What followed was a rebellion that England couldn't quite crush. Glyndŵr rallied farmers, nobles, and anyone else who hated paying English taxes. So, everyone. He fought guerrilla style, ambushing troops, torching castles, and vanishing into the hills like a medieval Batman. His supporters even drafted plans for an independent Welsh church and parliament. For a moment, it looked like Wales might actually break free. And then came the English response. Henry IV threw armies at him. Henry V threw bigger armies at him. Every time the crown thought they had Glyndŵr cornered, he slipped away. His ability to avoid capture bordered on supernatural. Villagers swore he could vanish into mist. Others claimed he had spies everywhere. Realistically, he just knew the Welsh terrain better than the invading knights in their shiny, clanky armor. But rebellions run on money and morale, and both eventually ran out. By 1415, Glyndŵr's forces were scattered, his castles lost, and his family captured. Yet the man himself? Gone. No dramatic last stand, no execution, no heroic martyrdom. He simply disappeared. One day he was leading a revolt. The next, he was a rumor. Some say he died in hiding. Others whispered he was still alive, waiting to return and finish what he started. The English crown hated this so much they kept officially listing him as a fugitive for years after he was probably dead. Nothing's more embarrassing than being haunted by a guy who may not even exist anymore. Owain Glyndŵr remains a national hero in Wales. The ghostly prince who defied the English, vanished into legend, and left behind a story too good to kill. For England, he was the rebel that got away. For history, he's proof that sometimes the most wanted man is the one you never catch. And so we close tonight's journey through the shadows of medieval history. These weren't just criminals or rebels. They were men and women who challenged empires, defied kings, and became legends in the process. Some were heroes, some were villains. Most were somewhere in between. History remembers them not because they followed the rules, but because they dared to break them. Whether driven by justice, ambition, or simple survival, they left marks that time could not erase. Thank you for joining me tonight. Until next time, rest well, and may your dreams be filled with the quiet echoes of history.